December 7th, 1941, a date that completely changed the United States. Pearl Harbor led America to quickly begin preparing for war. As American attitudes changed, the war was not just a part of the culture, it was the culture. Everybody worked towards winning the war, including Walt Disney. Americans began rationing clothing, food, and holding scrap metal drives, and Disney Studios contributed by using their loving and trusted characters in order to produce war propaganda that rallied support. Putting beloved Disney characters such as Mickey Mouse to use in war propaganda became a turning point for Americans as they watched their peacetime animated friends experience the war alongside them. The war enveloped them all. After Pearl Harbor, people in the United States grew dependent on the radio reports of the fighting overseas, and popular entertainment such as Disney's propaganda served as an escapist outlet, allowing Americans brief getaways from war worries. Walt Disney presented the world with characters that displayed an emotional complexity and spirit that characters of other artists lacked, including Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse first debuted in 1928 in New York City with the release of Steamboat Willie. Mickey was created with a cooperation between WWII, iWorks, and Walt Disney. While releasing Mickey Mouse, they had in mind a cartoon in which music, effects, and actions would all become synchronized. Over time, the character of Mickey Mouse showed progression in his attitude, physical traits, and personality. Prior to World War II, Disney's achievements included the debut of Mickey Mouse and other early characters. Prior to their wartime work, Disney Studios had created other short films that conveyed messages to the public, such as The Three Little Pigs. Disney had not intended for this film to be anything more than entertainment, but the public viewed this as Disney's comet and fable form in the Depression era. Disney worked alongside his brother Roy Disney in Kansas City in order to create the animation industry. During World War II, Disney used animation to help the Allied war effort. Walt Disney thought that the concept of animation would help with training films for the military in ways that no live-action movie could. Disney's experiences in 1918 with World War I helped him with his World War II efforts. He wanted to enlist in the army in World War I, but was unable to because of age, and instead became a Red Cross ambulance driver in France. He was known as the unit's unofficial artist because he painted medals onto jackets and camouflaged German helmets. Later in 1919, Disney returned to the United States to make a career in commercial art. He ended up in Kansas City and began to work for Kansas City Film Ad. Due to an unsuccessful venture in Kansas City, Disney had to move to Hollywood in 1923, and there he became a director. After moving his business to Hollywood, Disney was very successful. The day after Pearl Harbor, the United States Army moved into the Disney studio lot in Burbank, California, to house troops to protect a nearby aircraft plant. They remained there for the duration of the war. Walt Disney was then recruited by the government to create training films for the military. The relationship between Disney Studios and the United States government formed in 1941 before Pearl Harbor. When Walt Disney began to make films for Canada, relations grew. In 1941, Disney also went on a goodwill tour of South America, strengthening relations. Disney's work for Canada and dealings with the coordinator of Inter-American Affairs paved the way for a close relationship between the studio and the government. Throughout the war, Disney and staff worked with the U.S. government and military to produce military training and educational films, propaganda posters, and comic books, designing about 1,200 different pieces of insignias. He provided insignias for Nose Art, Red Cross, bombing squadrons, training schools, record books, and allied units. Disney's propaganda emphasized the importance of citizens, participation in military service, and the need for domestic and foreign aid. Disney's passion towards his war work was shown as he said, "It's hard to say good things about a war, but this is a tremendous opportunity to show what our medium can do. Not many people get a chance like this to help out their country and themselves." Disney's cartoons were produced to serve a purpose, such as New Spirit, Victory Vehicles, and Victory Through Air Power, which the New York Times gave a review stating, "This is the most encouraging and inspiring propaganda the screen has afforded us in a long time. Mr. Disney and staff can be proud of their accomplishment." Disney Studios' propaganda films were originally just intended for servicemen, but they were eventually released to the public too. 92 million Americans went to the movies weekly, so Disney shorts were played as trailers in order to reach the public. Due to prior experience in World War I, Disney understood that positive propaganda was gravely important for the boost in morale for soldiers. While talking about propaganda, he once said that, "They meant a lot to the men who were fighting. How could you turn them down?" Disney understood that his colorful and lively propaganda increased confidence, hope, and morale for the military and public, because he understood that rallying through characters that were already popular and trusted would produce positive results. Now, Dr. Richard Schiefelbusch, World War II veteran, discusses how Walt Disney's work impacted him.
What the deal is really to be creative. That's what he did. He didn't lecture and tell people shame on you and things like that. He just made it fun. And he was clever enough to do that. And then when it got into production, it reached everybody or anybody. They could laugh and forget it, or they could do something else, you know, but it was there. And I always enjoyed it. I think what Disney did is to reach all levels of society. All levels. That's pretty wonderful.
Yes. In 1939, as the Disney studios worked on propaganda, they used different characters for different purposes based on their personalities. Mickey Mouse was rarely found on war insignia because his personality was not very warlike, and he was viewed as a bashful, loving boy next door. Mickey was used for peacetime America propaganda because, as Disney said, Mickey was simply a little personality assigned to the purposes of laughter. In contrast, Donald Duck was extremely popular during wartime propaganda. Because his personality was cocky, he had typical angry gestures and was viewed as a feisty side of American culture. In all of Donald's films, he was quick-tempered, always ready for a fight, and viewed as the kind of guy that would be ideal in the trenches. Disney used Minnie Mouse primarily to approach the housewives and female population. Minnie Mouse was viewed as an all-American girl and exerted the innocence of a girl next door while maintaining an independence of her own. These characteristics made her an effective character to help reach the women of wartime society. Disney helped illustrate major issues through his lovable and trusted characters, and this proved to be an effective method. Donald Duck, Minnie Mouse, Mickey Mouse, and the rest of Disney Studio went to war with the nation in order to inspire them to contributing to a patriotic cause. The releases of many of Walt Disney shorts were successful in completing their desired task, because they simplified concepts, making them easy enough for children to understand. Once when Disney was in an interview, he stated that he believed that people could be educated and still be entertained, and this was illustrated through his war propaganda. Walt Disney worked with the government and military to produce military training and educational films that entertained the public while enforcing ideas about wartime America. By 1942, 75% of the studio's productions were government-based. Disney's wartime shorts were successful, such as The New Spirit, ordered by the U.S. Treasury, featuring Donald Duck to encourage American citizens to pay their income taxes on time to support the war effort. The film was effective because it explained the process of how to fill out a tax form in a simple step-by-step process. In the following clipping from The New Spirit, it discusses what income taxes were needed for in the war effort.
Your country is at war. Your country needs taxes for guns, taxes for ships, taxes for democracy, taxes to beat the Axis.
Oh boy, taxes to beat the Axis!
The film proved its effectiveness because prior to its release in 1939, only 15% of taxpayers paid an income tax. By 1943, 80% paid taxes. Another effective short was Out of the Frying Pan Into the Firing Line, featuring Minnie Mouse in 1942. This film was directed towards housewives to teach them the importance of conservation and recycling of kitchen fats, which could be turned into glycerin for the war effort. This film explained how simple it was to contribute kitchen fats for the war effort and how the local meat dealers would pay the donators accordingly in response to the weight donated. Mickey Mouse was also shown as a boy on the front, which was rare because Donald Duck was usually used for wartime propaganda. This film was effective because women realized how they were important to the war effort, and the public began pouring in massive amounts of glycerin, which profited the nation as well as the people because they were being paid for their donation. Throughout the war, Disney's work was talked about in several newspapers. In 1942, the Youngstown Vindicator of Ohio talked about the New Spirit and how Disney made propaganda more appealing. They said, Disney's short may prove to be more stirring entertainment than those earlier government-sponsored films which depicted the war program in solemn, pseudo-mystical terms. In addition to propaganda films, Walt Disney advocated for social causes for developing countries, such as in The Unseen Enemy, when he addressed what disease was and how to fight it. Some other Disney films advocating for social causes were The Litter Bug, Motor Mania, and The Winged Scrooge, created for Latin America to teach them about malaria. Walt Disney's use of cartooning in propaganda inspired cartoonists like John Sutherland to use cartooning in future propaganda. During the Cold War, Sutherland created Why Play Leapfrog to convince workers that increased productivity brings greater purchasing power. Disney's films were essential in spurring public support. His propaganda became a gateway and guide for people everywhere, and he changed the way propaganda was perceived. Walt Disney left behind a legacy that lives on today.